Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gents. This is Mr. Ayala with another video lesson for you. As always, please make sure that you're writing down your notes and that you actually listen to the conversation that is occurring. It is very difficult to have the full information if you do not write and listen to all the information being presented. Yet again, this is Mr. Ayala. This is the Texas Revolution. So, Spanish Texas. Texas was originally called Tejas when it was controlled by the Spanish and the Mexican government. It was extremely desirable because of its forests, grassy fields, rivers, and natural harbors. If you look at Tejas or even Texas in modern times, they have a large amount of harbors, and they have some really good geography to do a lot of items. In 1821, only approximately 4,000 Tejanos, or the Spanish who called Texas home, actually lived there. Spain ends up trying to get more settlers to move in, but the Apache and the Comanche made this very difficult. They were two of the most warlike groups in North America, next to the Seminole Indians themselves down here in Florida. Spain decided that they're going to allow the Austin family to actually begin to start settlements. So after Mexico gets its independence from Spain, it changes what occurs in Texas. So Steve Austin takes over for his grandfather and is given land given the land that Spain gave to his father in Tejas or Texas. In 1821, Mexico gets independence from Spain. So what happens is, meanwhile, Steve Austin is attracting 297 different families to his colony in Texas, and these families will be known as the Old 300. So even if you go to Texas today, you will see the old families still there. So the success of Steve Austin and the Old 300 actually ends up bringing more and more Americans to Tejas. So by 1830, the Americans outnumber the Tejanos 6-1 in the Mexican state of Tejas, which we will now soon call Texas. So tensions in Tejas begin to rise because a lot of these American settlers really resent having to follow Mexican laws, especially when Mexico outlawed slavery in 1829. And a lot of these Americans are upset because they actually brought their slaves with them into Tejas as they immigrated to Texas. While the Tejanos in the area felt that the Americans thought they were superior and deserved special treatment because they were from the United States of America. So Mexico sent in some investigators to see what was occurring and found out that a lot of these tensions were extremely high in Tejas and decided they wanted to try to do something about it. So the Mexican government does three major things. One, Texas was now closed to more American settlers, and that the Texans had to begin to pay Mexican taxes. And lastly, more Mexican troops were brought in to try to enforce these laws of the Mexican government. So as Mexico brings in more and more troops to Texas, tensions begin to rise even higher, and Austin ends up going to Mexico City to try to petition the Mexican government for multiple reforms, including the ability to govern themselves. So Steve Austin meets with the president of Mexico, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, to try to have these conversations. But meanwhile, Santa Anna learns that Steve Austin will begin to rebel against the Mexican government if Santa Anna did not agree to do what Steve Austin and the Americans in Texas wanted. So he decides to jail Steve Austin for 1 year to try to reduce these tensions. Meanwhile, Santa Anna sends more and more troops to Texas to try to take the weapons and the artillery from the American Texans in Tejas. This ends up failing, and the American immigrants in Texas take over the Alamo in 1835 to begin their rebellion. So in 1836, the Texans held a meeting at Washington on the Bravos to discuss the revolt that is occurring. Sam Houston is given command of the Texan Army, which is comprised of two small forces with approximately 600 men in total. The two men who would lead these groups are William Travis and Juan Sanguin, I'm so sorry about that horrible Spanish, who led these two groups. So on February 23rd of 1836, the Mexican troops begin to surround the city of San Antonio and begin what is known as the Siege of the Alamo. For 12 days, the men in the Alamo survived the siege, but on day 13, 1800, Mexican troops stormed the Alamo, and the Texans began to run out of ammunition. All but 5 of the Texans who were held up in the Alamo were killed, and this will end what we call the Battle for the Alamo. And remember, the Alamo becomes a rallying cry for the Texan army. Then Santa Anna decides to massacre 300 people at the city of Goliad. And because of these 2 massacres at the Alamo and Goliad, the Texas army began to grow. At San Jacinto, Santa Anna and Houston end up meeting. Sam Houston is the winner of this battle, and what happens is because of the loss at San Jacinto, Santa Anna is forced to give the Texans their independence. So in September of 1836, Texas becomes what is known as the Lone Star Republic, and the president of Texas at this time would be Sam Houston. Make sure you know that. And in 1836, Texas asked Congress to be annexed to the United States. But Northerners are fearing that Texas would give too much power to these slave states and would imbalance the power in Congress and in the Electoral College. So Texas would not be annexed for another 10 years, right prior to the Mexican-American War.